My boss told everyone I was lazy while I was hospitalized, so I came back, exposed his lies to HR, and took his office after he got fired. I've been working at this company for over 3 years, always putting in the hours. I never took sick days unless I was actually dying, and even then, I tried to work from my bed. Everyone at the office knew that about me. I was that person. The one who would stay late, pick up the slack when others couldn't be bothered, and grind just a little bit harder than most. But for some reason, my boss, Michael, had it out for me from the start. I never understood why. He'd throw me in the deep end with tasks, always just a little bit outside of what I was comfortable with, then criticize me when I didn't nail them perfectly. Everyone around me would tell me to let it slide. "It's just Michael," they'd say. "He's like that with everyone." But it wasn't just like that. It felt personal. And it was starting to get to me. Then, everything changed. I woke up one morning feeling off. What I thought was just a regular flu quickly spiraled into something much worse. My stomach had this constant, gnawing pain, and I couldn't keep any food down. A trip to the ER, followed by a few tests, revealed I had an aggressive infection in my gut. The doctor said I needed to be hospitalized for a while. The timing couldn't have been worse. But there wasn't much I could do. I let the team know, apologized for being gone, and assured them I'd catch up once I was back. But I had no idea what was happening behind my back. I had no idea that while I was lying in a hospital bed, struggling to get through the pain, Michael was busy making sure everyone knew exactly what kind of employee I was: lazy, unreliable, disappearing at the first sign of trouble. I wasn't there to defend myself, and that left me completely vulnerable. I didn't know it yet. But I was about to return to a war zone, where my reputation had already been torn to shreds. When I came back to work after my hospital stay, I could feel something was off. People looked at me strangely, whispered behind my back, and their smiles never reached their eyes. I thought it was all in my head at first, but the longer I sat at my desk, the more I realized I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't the same employee I had been before. Not in their eyes. It wasn't until the 3rd day back that I overheard a conversation between 2 of my coworkers. I had gone to the break room to grab some coffee, trying to settle back into the routine. As I walked past the small kitchen area, I caught snippets of their voices, double quotes, ... just disappeared for weeks. Didn't even check in, one of them said. I mean, if I was really that sick, I'd still show up, at least to keep my reputation intact. The other one snorted. Right, and here I thought she was the hard worker. Guess we were wrong. I froze. My stomach twisted into a knot, the heat rising to my face. They weren't talking about my absence like it was a normal sick leave. They were buying into whatever Michael had been telling them while I was gone. Lazy, unreliable, and disappearing when it gets tough were just a few of the words that floated back to me in bits and pieces. It hit me like a brick wall. Michael wasn't just trying to get me off his back. He had been actively spreading lies about marooning my reputation while I was bedridden. Too weak to fight back, I thought about all the times I'd pushed myself, ignoring my own limits for this job. All the long nights I'd sacrificed. And this is how it all came crashing down. My chest tightened with a mix of confusion and rising anger. I had been so vulnerable, fighting for my life, and here they were, tearing apart everything I had worked for. It wasn't just a rumor. It was a full-on betrayal. And Michael wasn't done yet. I confronted one of my colleagues who had always been supportive, someone I trusted. Sarah had always been kind, often the first to offer a smile when I was buried in deadlines. I thought maybe she had heard the rumors too, but hadn't said anything. I pulled her aside one afternoon, hoping for some clarity. "Sarah," I started, my voice trembling slightly, "is there something going on? People are acting like I'm not even here, like I've done something wrong." She looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Her eyes dropped to the floor, and I knew something was wrong. I didn't have to say anything else. She'd been avoiding me, and I could feel it. After a long pause, she sighed heavily. "Look, I didn't want to say anything, but you need to know," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Michael's been telling HR that you've been slacking off, that you're unreliable. He said you were playing the sympathy card with your hospitalization, that you're always looking for an excuse to avoid work." I felt the air leave my lungs as the words hit me. It was as if the ground shifted beneath me, and suddenly everything made sense. The rumors, the whispers, the sideways glances, they were all true. Michael had poisoned everyone's perception of me while I was fighting for my life, and now I was being painted as lazy. As if being hospitalized had somehow made me a villain in my own story. Sarah looked at me with sympathy, her face pale. "I'm sorry, but a lot of people, They believe him, you know. They think you are just taking advantage of the situation." It's hard to change people's minds once something's been said. Her words echoed in my head. My professional reputation, the one thing I had worked so hard to build, had been shattered. And worse, there was no way to fix it now. I felt completely alone in a place I'd once called my second home. All the work I had done to prove myself meant nothing now. The betrayal was too deep. I spent the next few days quietly gathering information, making sure I wasn't imagining things. I knew that if I was going to fight back, I couldn't just throw accusations around without evidence. I wasn't going to let Michael get away with destroying everything I had worked for. So, I started documenting everything: emails, messages, any piece of communication I could find that would back up my side of the story. I went through my email threads, meticulously scrolling through old conversations with Michael. I found a couple of instances where he'd criticized me for taking a day off, even though the doctors had explicitly told me to rest. It was there in black and white. He'd complained about my work ethic, just days after I'd been discharged from the hospital. But I needed more than just those. I needed proof that his manipulation had extended beyond mere words. So I turned to the company's internal chat system. I went through messages between Michael and other staff members, looking for any mention of my absence, any hint that he'd been spreading lies. It was tedious, draining work, but I couldn't afford to miss anything. As the hours passed, my frustration began to boil over. Each click of the mouse, each message I uncovered, made my blood pressure rise. The deeper I dug, the more it became clear. Michael had been plotting this for weeks, using every chance he had to bury me. He'd even manipulated HR into believing I wasn't just absent, but unreliable. I had no idea how far he'd gone, but I knew I couldn't let this stand. It wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about taking control. I wasn't going to let him win. My anger, though sharp and burning, slowly morphed into something more purposeful. I could feel the quiet determination building inside me. I was going to take him down, one piece of evidence at a time. And when I did, there would be no question left about who the real problem was. The first step was simple. I needed to find the courage to confront HR. I couldn't wait anymore. It was time to go to HR. I walked into the small, sterile office with my heart pounding. I had all the evidence in hand emails, screenshots, and even some notes from coworkers who had witnessed Michael's behavior. The thought of confronting HR terrified me, but I knew this was the only way to get the truth out. The door clicked shut behind me, and I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. "I've come to talk about the situation with Michael," I said, my voice unsteady but determined. I laid out the evidence in front of the HR rep, watching her closely as I went through the details. I explained how Michael had spread lies, how he'd manipulated the truth to tarnish my reputation while I was ill. The HR rep nodded, taking notes. She didn't say much, but her face remained impassive. When I finished, she promised to look into it, assured me they'd investigate. It wasn't much of a reassurance, but it was something. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope, tiny spark of justice. Maybe this wouldn't be the uphill battle I feared. But then, as I left the HR office, I felt it creeping in the self-doubt. What if they didn't believe me? What if Michael had covered his tracks too well? The thought gnawed at me as I sat at my desk waiting for the next move. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much longer fight. I had laid out everything, but now the waiting game began. Would they take me seriously? Would they do anything at all? I had no idea. And as the hours passed without a word from HR, the crushing uncertainty began to settle in. I thought going to HR would be the hard part. But Michael wasn't done yet. Within days, things at work became unbearable. Michael didn't just let me slide back into my routine, he made sure everyone knew exactly how he felt about me. He started undermining me in meetings, openly questioning my work and belittling my contributions in front of the team. The whispers and sideways glances turned into more open ridicule. He'd take every opportunity to throw my work under the bus, casually saying things like, "Well, if we're lucky, we can rely on her this time, or maybe next time she'll actually show up for work." It wasn't just the words. It was the way he did it. Every slight felt like a punch. But what stung the most wasn't the insults, it was the way some of my coworkers just stood there, nodding along. Others, however, had begun to turn. It started with small things, encouraging looks, sympathetic glances, a few of them speaking up when Michael crossed the line. But I couldn't shake the feeling that, for every ally I had gained, there were twice as many who still believed Michael's lies. The division in the office became palpable. Some coworkers quietly supported me, but others, including those who I thought were my friends, stayed loyal to Michael. I could hear them whispering about me in the break room, and I could feel the judgment in the air. I was suddenly on the outside, no longer part of the team. Just the lazy employee everyone whispered about. It was like I was trapped in this toxic bubble, caught between a few allies and a majority who still bought into Michael's version of the story. The anger inside me was growing, but so was my sense of injustice. The fight had escalated and I wasn't sure if I could win it anymore. I wasn't alone anymore. I started to find allies in unexpected places. One morning, as I sat at my desk, trying to ignore the tension building around me, I was approached by Lisa, a senior manager. She'd always been the quiet, type-observant, professional, and not one to get involved in office drama. I'd always admired her from a distance, and truthfully, I never expected her to notice what was happening to me, but she did. "You know," she said, sitting down next to my desk, her voice low so no one could overhear. "I've been watching Michael for a while. He's a manipulator. I don't know what he's told you, but I can see through it." I was stunned. No one had said anything like that to me before. Lisa had been with the company for years, respected by everyone, and here she was, telling me she knew exactly what was going on. "I don't know if anyone else sees it, but I do," she continued. "He's been playing everyone, including HR. I'm going to help you." She told me she had seen Michael twist facts and manipulate situations before, and she offered advice on how to gather more evidence, how to present my case more strategically. She even promised to discreetly speak to a few others who could back up my story. Suddenly, the weight of everything I'd been dealing with didn't feel as crushing. I had a real ally. Lisa's support gave me a clearer path forward, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't just spinning my wheels. With Lisa on my side, I had a chance to expose Michael for the manipulative, toxic manager he truly was. I wasn't alone anymore, and I wasn't giving up. I couldn't just wait for HR anymore. I needed to act. Lisa's support was a game changer, but I knew I couldn't rely on HR alone to fix this. Michael had too much power, too much influence. If I wanted him out, I had to take control of the situation myself. It was time to turn the tables. I started organizing everything. The emails, the messages, the recorded conversations, everything I could find that proved Michael's manipulation. I spent countless nights going through every piece of evidence, piecing together a timeline of lies and betrayals. It wasn't just about proving I was innocent. It was about proving he was guilty of what he'd done. But I couldn't do it alone. I reached out to a lawyer for advice, making sure I knew what my rights were, how to legally protect myself during this process. It felt empowering to finally take control of the situation in a way that was methodical. Calculated at work, I started quietly gaining allies. I spoke to a few trusted colleagues, making sure they understood the situation without directly involving them. Slowly, others began to come forward with their own stories of Michael's behavior. They had seen how he manipulated people, how he twisted the truth to suit his needs. But most importantly, they were now willing to speak up. The tension was building. The closer I got to exposing him, the more I could feel it. Michael was still playing his games, thinking I was just a victim. But he didn't know I was getting ready to make my move. I was no longer just defending myself, I was preparing for something bigger. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about taking back my power and making sure Michael never had the chance to hurt anyone else. I didn't expect Michael to make such a rookie mistake. It happened one afternoon during a company-wide meeting. I had been sitting quietly, listening as Michael presented a project update, his usual smug demeanor in full force. Everyone in the room was focused on him. But I couldn't shake the feeling that today was different. As the meeting went on, Michael made a comment that caught my ear. He was talking about the team's performance and casually mentioned, "Well, it's not like I've had to do a lot of cleaning up after people, except for a few who were out sick for weeks, obviously." I felt the blood drain from my face as the words hit me. There it was, right in front of everyone. Michael, in his attempt to sound like the hard-working manager, had just inadvertently exposed himself. He had mentioned my absence, throwing it into the conversation as if it were a normal part of the discussion. The problem? He said it so casually, like it was an open secret, as if he had been using my illness as a tool for his narrative all along. And in doing so, he had confirmed it all. The lies, the manipulation, everything he had told HR, everything he had said behind my back was now in the open. He had unknowingly admitted to his own deceit, all in front of the same people who had been involved in the investigation. It was like a switch flipped inside me. My heart raced as I realized that this was it. This was the final piece of evidence I needed to expose him completely. He had just handed me the key to his downfall. I could feel the satisfaction bubbling up inside me. Michael thought he was untouchable, but today he'd made the biggest mistake of his career. And now I had everything I needed to bring him down. I couldn't believe the moment had finally arrived. Michael's lies were about to be exposed. After weeks of gathering evidence, speaking to my colleagues, and carefully plotting my next move, I finally had everything I needed. I walked into HR's office, my heart pounding but my steps steady. Lisa had already given me the heads up that she'd be supporting me, and I knew this was the moment I'd been waiting for. I laid everything out on the table: emails, screenshots, messages, and most importantly, the recording of Michael's careless slip-up during the meeting. Each piece of evidence was a nail in Michael's coffin. I explained everything, my voice calm but firm, as I told HR how Michael had manipulated the situation, how he'd lied about my absence, and how he had damaged my professional reputation without reason. When I pulled up the video clip of Michael's careless remark, the room went silent. I watched as HR's face shifted from skepticism to shock. Michael, who had been sitting silently across the room, suddenly shot up from his chair. His face turned red with anger. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "That's not what I meant. This is all a misunderstanding." but the damage had been done. The evidence was undeniable. The video spoke for itself. Michael's calm facade cracked, and his desperation became clear. He began flailing, trying to explain away his words. But there was no escaping the truth anymore. I felt a surge of exhilaration, a feeling I hadn't had in weeks. I had fought for my truth, and now, for the first time in a long time, I was being heard. Michael's lies were no longer his shield, they were his downfall. HR promised to start an investigation immediately. And as I walked out of the room, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. Justice was finally within reach. I watched as Michael was escorted out of the building. His reign of lies was over. It was surreal. The man who had tried to tear me down for so long, the one who had manipulated, belittled, and turned my coworkers against me, was being escorted out with nothing more than a box of personal belongings in his arms. I could hear his protests as the security team led him down the hallway. But his words were drowned out by the deafening silence in the office. His power had crumbled in a matter of days, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of victory. But even as I watched him leave, a strange heaviness settled over me. The relief I had expected wasn't as pure as I thought it would be. Sure, Michael was gone. But the emotional toll of everything that had happened weighed heavily on me. I had fought for so long, but in the process, I had lost pieces of my self-trust in people, confidence in my career, even my own peace of mind as I sat at my desk that day. I realized how deeply this situation had hurt me. I'd been humiliated, pushed to my limits, and questioned in ways that no one should ever have to endure. But now I had my dignity back. I had fought back and won, not just for my job, but for the respect I deserved. It wasn't a perfect win. The scars would take time to heal. But there was closure now, a sense of finality. Michael had lost, and I had earned my place back in the office, in my career, and in the world. As the day ended, I couldn't help but wonder what was next. What kind of person would I be after all this? I was sitting in Michael's office, realizing how far I had come. The walls, once a symbol of his control, now felt like a triumph. I leaned back in the chair, staring out the window. From here, it all seemed surreal, like the last few months had been nothing but a blur. But the truth was, I had earned this seat. After everything that had happened, I was finally where I belonged. It wasn't just the promotion that had come in the wake of Michael's departure. It was the respect. The respect from my colleagues who had once doubted me. I could feel the shift. They no longer saw me as the person Michael had tried to make me out to be. They saw me as a leader, someone who had fought for their place and come out stronger. On the other side, I ran my fingers across the desk, a symbol of what had been taken from me and what I had now reclaimed. This wasn't just a new office, it was my victory. I wasn't just taking Michael's position. I was taking back my career, my power, and my self-worth. This office now represented my fight for justice, my resilience in the face of betrayal. There was no bitterness left in me anymore, only a deep, quiet satisfaction. The weight of the last few months had lifted, and in its place, I felt lighter, empowered, and ready for the future. I had won not just for myself, but for everyone who had been silenced, belittled, or overlooked. And now, as I sat behind this desk, I couldn't help but smile. The tables had turned, and I was in control. Michael's lies were buried, and my story had only just begun.